Good morning, saints. Good morning, sinners. That's good. Usually most people don't get that second part very well, but the Methodists got that great. Check. All right, this is good. My name, as Pastor Jen said, is John Boss. I have the privilege of serving as the executive director of Open Heart Kitchen. This is my last worship service at Holy Cross in Livermore was Christmas Eve of 2022, and then I started on January 1st of 2023 as the executive director of OHK. I did not negotiate very well for myself, a little bit of a break there. So, I've been an ELCA, Evangelical Lutheran Church in America pastor for 20-something years, coming up on 3 decades now. Served a congregation on the south side of Chicago for about 6 years before accepting the call to Holy Cross. And you know, in my mind, I thought I'll be there just a few years. Well, that turned into 16 years. And I love long pastorates. I think that's where great things happen in churches. If you leave after 3 years, it took you a year to say hello and a year to say goodbye. So you really had a year, and no one trusts you, and you don't trust them. So it takes at least 10 years to start to see the fruits of any venture, I think, in any organization, churches, nonprofits, what have you, to really figure out how much groundwork you've laid to really see amazing things start to happen. Since I'm not officially connected to any church right now, although I love the invitation to come and join the choir and be able to sing with these amazing folks who sounded great and indulged me to let me come and sing this amazing John Rutter song with them this morning. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, choir. That was a lot of fun. So I get to move around from church to church and meet a lot of different people. The downside to that is I don't really get to sort of, make my home in any one church and get to show up week in and week out and pitch in and help out. But being able to move around the Bay Area and just see different churches and different cultures and meet different people has been a ton of fun for me. And so we'll see if I can carve out some sort of third way middle ground where I can still do a little bit of that, but also put some roots down. And honestly, Methodists would be in the running for me, so as a Lutheran, Lutheran, Methodist, or Presbyterian, or Episcopalian, I feel at home in all of those churches. So today is especially meaningful to me because Linwood United Methodist Church and Holy Cross Lutheran Church were the dreamers. You were the pioneers of Open Heart Kitchen all the way back to 1995. The official story of how Open Heart Kitchen came to be is a little bit mythic and murky at this point in time, but in my mind, I like to envision a group of passionate individuals gathering around a dinner table somewhere, recognizing that there are individuals and families in our community who do not have access to food and do not know where their next meal is going to come from. And so I like to believe that group of people almost 30 years ago said, this is not okay. One hungry person in the Tri-Valley is not okay with us. Let's do something about it. So here we are almost 30 years later with a staff of almost 30 people and a budget of $4 million a year. We're not just talking about feeding one person, but we're actually have the wild, audacious goal of how would we stamp out food insecurity for good and not just manage it. So when Pastor Jen reached out to say she was really excited to invite the best theologian on the West Coast to come and lead worship today, I was flattered. But then Jen said that person wasn't available to come and preach today. So she then proceeded to ask if the former pastor of the slowest growing church in the Tri-Valley was available, and I said, yes, I am. Yeah. Now, one of my favorite things to do as a Lutheran pastor is to poke fun at my tradition. Lutherans, also known as God's frozen chosen, are not the most outward in our expressions of praise and exuberance, even when we truly are having fun. When we're happy, we tend to show it on the inside. We smile and we clap on the inside. Rarely on the outside will you see this happen. So if you look at me at any point in time during worship today, and it looks like I might need medical attention or possibly an exorcism, just hang up the cell phone on 911 or the Vatican. That's just what Lutherans look like when they worship. It might look like I have swallowed a porcupine and refused to let it escape. So I might just trying to clap on the beat. But in all seriousness, Pastor Jen, Pastor Corey, people of Linwood, thank you for inviting me and for your incredible, amazing support for 30 years. It really means the world to me and to our organization. And also, thank you for sharing two of the most amazing people that I have known since I've lived in California for about 17 years now, Linda Van Pelt and Betsy McClellan. I and my wife Shonda, who's here today, and my father, who flew in from North Carolina just to worship at Linwood Methodist Church, right? We've known Linda for many years, going all the way back to the days of the Livermore Homeless Refuge, and I would clone her and place her in any church in the world, and then watch those churches immediately be more loving and passionate in their ministry. That's Linda. Yeah. And Betsy McClellan, well, she's just one of the best and brightest and most beloved volunteers at Open Heart Kitchen. I'm not sure, I emailed Betsy, I think last week, just to say thank you. She was at our gala, and just how much we appreciate her and her support, and Mark, and just the whole McClellan clan. And she wrote back, she's like, hey, I'll see you at Linwood Methodist Church. I was like, wait, you're connected to those folks? She said, yeah, and 20 plus years now, I found out this morning. So at first I had written in here, I didn't know if Linwood or Open Heart Kitchen had claimed her first, but I'm claiming exclusive rights on her now. Despite what you may think, she's ours. You can occasionally spend time with her, but if you try to take her from us, I will fight you after worship today. Why are you laughing? So I want to apologize up front that my sermon today is going to be way too long. However, Pastor Jen and I were talking, it's going to be so long today that when Pastor Jen preaches next week, you're going to say, man, your sermons are just the right length, Pastor Jen. So that's my gift to Pastor Jen this morning. So if you need to get up and use the restroom 4 or 5 times during the sermon, I'm okay with that. I think they're right through this door here, So one of the most important responsibilities that I have at Open Heart Kitchen is working with an amazing group of people to navigate change. Navigate change in our organization, navigate change in people's lives, the changes that they envision for themselves and their families, and we get to do this on large and small scale level each and every day at Open Heart Kitchen. The type of change that meets people right where they are in their need at any point in time, and the larger system, strategic thinking kind of scale that wonders what a food secure Tri-Valley might look like. I have to determine when to turn the temperature up at Open Heart Kitchen to guard against complacency and our all too common human tendency to stake out these relative positions of comfort. And conversely, I also have the opportunity to determine when to turn the temperature down, because honestly, no one person or no one organization can endure high levels of speed and intensity indefinitely. It's sort of a mix and match between the microwave approach and the crock pot approach. Turn the temperature up too high, whatever you're cooking gets burned. Don't turn it up high enough, it never gets cooked. Ultimately, both of these movements are captured in what people talk about as a theory of change, which simply put is the sum total of all of our strategies, actions, and conditions and resources that when you bring them and combine them together, they facilitate change and achieve desired outcomes. And since I have the privilege of walking alongside folks who are oftentimes attempting to navigate these incredibly complex changes in their lives, like going from food security to the loss of a job, to the loss of a home, to now not knowing where their next meal is coming from, or being housed to no longer knowing if they'll have a place to lay their head at tonight, or from feeling safe and secure in a relationship to now being pursued by an abuser. Conversations around change come up frequently. Each person I work with knows that they will, in their life, to get out of what they're in now, they will have to successfully navigate all kinds of changes in order to take a step forward into a future that is better and healthier and safer for themselves and their families. And at the very heart of these changes and these conversations about change, one must manage all the complex emotions that come with waiting and expecting, of longing and hoping, of despairing and experiencing disappointment along the way, of feeling possibility and promise, and yes, at times, a lot of pain. And I think one of the reasons I'm drawn to this work at Open Heart Kitchen is because it aligns with the same reasons I'm drawn to the season of Advent. I don't know if that was kind of unsettling today to hear essentially an Advent gospel reading in the midst of this ordinary post-Pentecost green-wearing season time, right, that we're in. But Advent is easily my favorite liturgical time of the church's calendar. It's been my favorite as long as I can remember. I've always been captivated and drawn to this kind of liminal space that exists between the dreaming and the coming true, that in-between space, as it were, that's always been a space that feels the most authentically human to me, because it is a space not ignorant or disconnected from the past, nor is it unable or unwilling to look ahead to the future and to envision a life, a world, perhaps a relationship as it could or maybe even should be. The folks I work with and walk alongside of don't claim to be Advent people, but that's who they are. The problem that many of them face is that they feel stuck in a kind of crawl space, if you will. You know this space beneath your home, right? It's that space beneath your house that you have to drop into, and no one goes there because you want to. It's dark and dank, and the reason you go there is because something is usually broken and no longer working properly. Now, technically, you can still move around in the crawl space of your home in just about any direction you like, but there are dangers lurking at every turn. Spiders, anyone afraid of spiders? I'm afraid of spiders. Uneven ground where maybe the pipe leaked for 17 years and you didn't know. Mold because of that leak. Mice, rats, squirrels, raccoons, porcupines. And if you raise your head up too quickly, forgetting where you are, your station as it were, you'll learn quickly that the boards just above your head do not move. They feel fixed. And so, like a crawl space, that the people I serve technically have all the same opportunities as everyone else. And in some respects, and at least at first glance, even the rules that they play by are the same rules that an employed, fed, sheltered, addiction-free, and relatively mentally healthy person plays by. But these same folks living in a crawl space of society never quite can stand up fully. What is a floor for most of us is a ceiling for them. And to break through this ceiling feels virtually impossible for many of them. And it's not for lack of trying. Their heads are so bruised at this point in time for trying to pop their head up through this unmovable floor that they have concluded they would be better off staying put in the situation they're in than to pop their head up one more time and act like the result will somehow be different this time. So they feel stuck and they feel bent over and only ever able to walk in this world and in our culture and in our society on their knees. Everyone tells them that they just need to work harder, and at some level they even accept this, and that this is the path and the key for them becoming unstuck or make better decisions. They've checked every box, though, many of them. Many of them have jumped through every hoop, done everything they've been told to do, and they still feel stuck. Like they will spend the majority of their life, and then by consequence and default, so will their children and their grandchildren and their great-grandchildren, stuck in the changing room of their life. My colleague, Pastor Mike Breen, recalls a story of when his health club added a feature that many people could take advantage of. It was an additional cost to their monthly membership dues, but People were saying this was the greatest thing that had ever been done, this new feature that had been added. So one day, Mike and his family are there at the club, and Mike's wife and kids are working the weights and walking on the treadmill, and he's relaxing there in the hot tub, doing the really hard work. And after working out on the treadmill, his two daughters, Rebecca and Elizabeth, come over to their dad, and they ask, "Hey, Dad, have you tried out this amazing new sun shower yet?" The sun shower was this club's newest feature opportunity. Mike says, "I don't even know what a sun shower is." He's like, "What is it? Do I even want to know?" And they point to it. It's that white tube over there by the pool. All you have to do is go in and you stand up in it, you get a tan, and you get totally refreshed. It's like being and standing on the beaches of South Carolina. And so with his daughter's exuberant assurance that he couldn't possibly ever regret stepping into the sun shower experience, he agrees to give it a try. So he's like, "What does it take?" And they're like, $5 for 3 minutes. So he rummages through his pocket, finds a $5 bill, walks over to the sun shower. The door opens to a room the size of a small closet. Nothing looks too dangerous at first glance, so Mike steps in, closes the door behind him, still not certain of what is about to happen. But he makes sure to read all the posted instructions there on the wall, follows them carefully, puts a pair of goggles on that had been hanging on a hook there on the wall, shuts his eyes tightly, and waits. Nothing happens. Oh yeah, of course, I have to put the $5 bill in the machine. Puts the $5 bill in the machine, waits, nothing. Well, that's not entirely true. Mike heard a slight whirring sound and a few clicks in the background, but he felt nothing. There's no way this experience resembles standing on the beautiful beaches of South Carolina. Well, the 3 minutes are up, the whirring sounds stop, he steps out. "What did you think?" his daughters asked. They were so excited. Clearly, they thought the sun shower was a fantastic idea. And Mike is thinking, how can I possibly let them down? But I want to be honest with them. And he says, "Well, I guess I just don't get it. I mean, it was okay. Probably something you girls and younger generations would like better." Elizabeth and Rebecca are profoundly disappointed. They had wanted so badly for their father to share in this experience that they found amazing, and yet he had not found it equally amazing. Frankly, he thinks the whole thing is a bit strange, but he didn't want to, rock the boat, so he doesn't say anything. Well, the next week, they're back at the health club again, and Rebecca and Elizabeth come running up to him with renewed fervor. "Dad," they said, "I think we figured out what happened. 3 minutes wasn't enough. This time you need to try 6 minutes. And then you'll feel the full effects of this amazing sun shower experience. Give it 6 minutes this time, okay, Dad?" So he starts to tell him how silly he thinks the whole thing is, but they're giving him those looks that daughters give their fathers, the ones that no father could ever possibly say no to. So he goes back into the giant white tube, steps inside the room, pulls the door closed behind him, reads the instructions on the wall, puts on the goggles, closes his eyes shut. Nothing is happening. All right, the money. Now it's up to $10 for 6 minutes. Goggles off, money in, closes his eyes again and waits. 6 minutes is a long time to wait when you're standing in an enclosed white tube with your eyes shut, listening to whirring and clicking noises. When it's over, he takes off his goggles, hangs them back on the hook, and leaves. Elizabeth and Rebecca are just outside the door, anxiously waiting for him. "How was it this time, Dad? Did you feel the effects this time?" And he looks at his daughter's expectant faces, and he's like, "I've just got to be honest. I'm so sorry. I just don't think this is for me." They, of course, think he's a total dork at this point in time. And he says, "I think this is something that you and your friends will enjoy, and it's not your fault. Maybe I'm just too old to get the full benefits of the sun shower." Now, one thing I must say, he goes on to say about his children, is they don't give up easily. The next week, they're ready. Really ready this time. "Dad, we get it. 3 minutes wasn't enough. 6 minutes wasn't enough. You got to try 9 minutes. You're going to really love 9 minutes of this. Just got to give it enough time. 9 minutes should do it for you. Come on, Dad, please, 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 just do it." Well, so at this point in time, Mike looks over at his wife for moral support, but she gives him that look of, "You got yourself into this, now get yourself out of this" look. So off he goes for a third time to this amazing, yet to be experienced amazing sun shower. So he steps in the tube, pulls the door shut, reads the instructions clear through a third time. Yep, just what he suspected. The wording hasn't changed. He's not missed anything. He puts on the goggles, closes his eyes, sigh, forgets the money, puts the money in. Now he's up to $15 for 9 minutes, and now like a $30 total investment. He's pulling out the calculator. That's how far in and invested he is in this thing. Goggles off, money in, goggles on, eyes closed. And let me tell you, he says, if 6 minutes is a long time, then 9 minutes feels just punishing. It feels like an eternity. So, realizing that what he's trying is not working, he decides, you know what? I'm just going to open my eyes. Only to find that now he can actually see through these goggles that he's wearing. He looks around, he wonders to himself if he could get more of a tan if he stands closer to the mirror. Then, opening his eyes a little wider, he sees some things that look like coat hooks on the wall. I thought that maybe they were there to reflect the rays more powerfully or something like that, but standing still for 15 minutes was not much more interesting than keeping his eyes closed for 9 minutes or 3 minutes, so he decides, you know what, I'm going to check this room out and turn around. And then there, about waist level, he sees a doorknob. What's this? He turns the knob, and the door opens into a room filled with the most refreshing light rays and replicated ocean breeze one could ever want or imagine. He had never seen or felt anything like this in his life. For 3 weeks, he had been standing in the changing room. Now, think of the 3 biggest celebrations in our church every year: Christmas, Easter, Pentecost. We can debate some. Maybe Pentecost is tied with some others. Pretty big deal. Christmas reminds us that God is with us. Easter reminds us that God is for us. Pentecost reminds us that God is in us. And although there's a different quality to each of these experiences, the one thing that these 3 giant festival days have in common is that each of them has a changing room period. All right? About 4 weeks leading up to Christmas for Advent, roughly 40 days for Lent leading up to Holy Week, and 50 days for Pentecost. We don't really have a name for this sort of liminal period, but it's right around the time kids and parents are getting excited about the end of school year and the beginning of summer. But the changing room for our ancestors in the faith wasn't some darkened space and small enclosed room with hooks for robes and goggles to hang on just outside the sunroom. The changing room of faith was the wilderness. It's always been the case that before change ever happens in the centers of respectability among the poverty unaffiliated, it starts on the margins, just out of sight, either by purpose or by accident, from those who presently wield power and influence. Now, according to ancient reports, people went out to the wilderness for all sorts of reasons. In the case of the story that Matthew tells in his gospel today, we're introduced to one margin wanderer who spends his time there, always, known simply by his sort of moniker of the Big Dipper. This is what they call John the Baptist. I totally made that up. They didn't call him that. John the Baptist. I like to call him the Big Dipper. Some people go out to see John the Baptist out of curiosity in the same way that some people slow down to gawk and stare as they pass by a horrific traffic accident. Others went out to see John to see if he really did pose a serious threat to their established way of life, the status quo, as it were. And then there were plenty of people who went out to the wilderness because they had, let's be honest, nowhere else to go, nothing to lose. And they had heard that John could help them find a better way forward. Now, these folks had either hit rock bottom or had hit a wall, and somehow the promise of this new beginning was all the proof that they needed to pack their bags to travel to the margins in hope of escaping their present nightmare. Now, in the season of Advent each year, each liturgical year, I've always found it interesting that the gospel writers insist that we go through to Christmas, but first and always first, we have to travel and have a conversation with John the Baptist before we're ever allowed to step into the sun shower room. I mean, it's hard to imagine a more stark contrast between God's representatives than John the Baptist and Jesus of Nazareth. John is kind of like the pit bull of the New Testament, the watchdog, if you will. It's almost like God has placed him in the narrative of Jesus' life just to make sure that people are up to the challenge, because if you cannot possibly buy what John the Baptist is selling, you certainly aren't going to be able to buy what Jesus has to offer. Now, I don't know if any of you in the room remember, but a few years back, maybe even 10 plus years, there was this 1 year event that happened in Livermore in this sort of barren lot there, not too far from the movie theater. And it was I think it was called the Bethlehem Experience. Anyone go to that? The group that put that on wanted to sort of reimagine or recreate Bethlehem, but they did it in a kind of a highly stylized 21st century way. Now, as a pastor in town, the people in my congregation were insisting that I was obligated to go to this. So my family and I loaded up in the car and off we went. Now, there were the usual suspects of the Christmas Epiphany story. There's Mary and Joseph and baby Jesus, the wise men, the shepherds, the angels, the barnyard animals. But something and someone was missing from the story. Do you know who wasn't there at the Bethlehem Experience? John the Baptist. Apparently, I'm told, rumor has it, his audition went terribly wrong. He was too abrupt, too uncivilized, too much for people to handle that he simply just didn't make the cut. But if I wish I would have seen that audition request, I would have loved to play the part of John the Baptist. I would have positioned myself there at the front gate where people were showing up to buy tickets. I would have been like one of those waiters at those restaurants where you pay a lot of money to for them to yell at you and dump your food on your table or in your lap, tell you to get up and go refill your own stinking drink over there. And basically, that it's really, really sad that you're one of those people who decided to pay money for someone to insult you, because most people would do that for free. Right? I would have loved playing John the Baptist. So imagine the scene for a moment. People come from all over the East Bay and beyond to be ushered back into the ancient Bethlehem experience. They've come to see baby Jesus born. They want to see him born while they're drinking hot chocolate. It's awesome. And when they're done, they can even walk across the street and they can pick up their Christmas tree, and they can do this in all one fell swoop. And after all of their patient waiting in the cold and dark, they're now next in line to be ushered into Bethlehem by Roman soldiers. Mixing up a lot of metaphors here. When all of a sudden and out of nowhere, I jump out from behind the burning bush, dressed like Gandalf from Lord of the Rings, and I yell, "You shall not pass!" And they try, and I yell even louder, "You bunch of slithering snakes from Pleasanton." And Dublin and Livermore. Who lied to you and said you could escape the fires of hell? Jesus' axe is in his hand, and he will cut you to the root. He's going to separate the good seed from the trash, and the trash he'll cast it into the fire. I'm not worthy to tie his shoelaces. You better get washed up, people. Strip off those fine clothes and come down here in the muddy water and get baptized. You've been warned. Now, your adorable, above-average early college acceptance kids would be crying at this point in time. You'd be angry, maybe even a little scared, thumbing through your phone looking for the website for corporate's number to file a complaint about the Bethlehem experience being too intense. How dare anyone, on top of all that, tell you that you and your children are anything less than perfect? Doesn't this scrappy character standing in your personal space know how much money you make in a year? Don't they know what kind of car you drive? Does he have any idea what kind of stock options you have lined up? Just ask anyone who knows about all this important stuff in our world, and they'll tell you that the message of repentance is wasted on you, perfect person. This rough and tough camel hair wearing guy would be better off spewing his bag of bad breath on the moochers hanging out down at Vineyard Resource Center in Livermore on Livermore Avenue. Those folks down there eating, sleeping, showering, and washing the clothes of their families. Those crazy moocher activities. Total losers. Now, if there was ever anyone in need of a reconstruction or repentance project, it's a group like those lowlifes. Am I right? Right? I'm right. And so you leave, unfulfilled, unsatisfied, unsettled. You didn't even get your Christmas tree. You stood in line for an hour in the dark and the cold, and you didn't even get to sing "O Holy Night, the stars are brightly shining." So just to make sure I was not reading my own thoughts and opinions back and putting them in the mouth of John the Baptist, I went back and reread this story. And it seems like had John been a first responder, he might have put together a kind of triage system there at the banks of the Jordan River. Now, the medical field today calls this in-the-field system START, S-T-A-R-T, which stands for Simple Triage and Rapid Treatment. But let's, for the sake of the conversation today, call it the Sinner's Triage and Rapid Transformation. So as many of you already know, John was well ahead of his time, especially in his decision to color code the victims of sin from the worst kind of sin to the not so bad when compared to those other kind of sins. Now, for those sinners who had no chance at all of getting clean, no matter how many times John dunked them in the water, no matter how many times John put soap on them to clean them, they're getting tagged with the gray tag. They're just as good as dead. There's no hope for them. Everyone should just give up on them. We should just give them a bus ticket to go live somewhere else. For those sinners who had done something really bad in their past and simply could not find a way to forgive themselves from it, he tagged them with a red tag. This meant that they actually had a chance. But if someone did not intervene immediately to help arrest their current trajectory, they simply would not make it very far. And then the yellow tags, they went to the sinners who were actually doing pretty well managing their sin. They had amassed enough money in their portfolio to hire the best sin managers, so they considered themselves the blessed ones. When they came down to the river, they clearly had some bumps and bruises from their times. Their sin or sins had gotten out of hand, but honestly, they weren't really in any immediate danger. And they were pretty good at hiding their sins from others. Their sins, after all, actually had hurt others more than it had hurt them, so they considered themselves the lucky ones because it really didn't impact them directly. So being tagged yellow meant that they had other things, they had things under control. They had a few skeletons in their closet, but nothing a little travel-sized wet wipe wouldn't take care of. So John could have had them in and out of the river quickly, just like that, and in no time. Hell, they didn't even have to be dunked. They just had to go in up to their waist, and they were good to go. And finally, some of the people that came to the river that day, well, they got the most cherished tags of all. They got the green tags. The green tags were the best. And I should say that the green tags were the most coveted of all color-coded tags because they were for people who had never, ever made any wrong decision or messed up in their life. Ever. They were simply coming to watch all the losers get baptized, the way you might go to a basketball game. They didn't put it that way, of course, because that would make them sound like the horrible people that they are. They said they had come down to support their family and friends. After all, they didn't want to appear holier than thou, although they were, let's be honest, holier than thou. They were the people that all other people compared themselves to on social media. They were the gold standards for righteousness. And so they pitched lawn chairs on the banks of the Jordan River and sipped their margaritas and watched all the losers get taken care of. In fact, people poured out of Jerusalem, Judea, and the Jordanian countryside to hear and see John in action. And there at the River Jordan, those who came to confess their sins were baptized into a changed life. And some people came up out of the water that day and said it felt like they were a new creation. It was as if coming up out of that water was like coming face to face with the very first day of the rest of their lives, and they were singing, "Morning has broken like the first morning, blackbird has spoken like the first bird," and they were morning and blackbird. And some people that day came up out of the water, and they felt like they'd been born again, like they were babies, fresh and clean and not guilty of anything, not victims of their worst decision on their worst day, and that the rest of their lives were ahead of them, full of possibility and potential and promise, without limitation or obstacle. It was like someone loved them enough to press their faces against that hospital nursery window to say, there, that child is mine, she belongs to me. And although you had no hair like me, you were perfect, you had no worry, no stain, no blemish, no marks against you, no mistakes. You were brand new with the rest of your life waiting ahead of you. And some people even came up that day from the water and said, it feels like I've turned over a new leaf. And others said it felt like they turned a page in a book. It's like I was trying to figure out the cold, hard calculus of the world when I made a terrible mistake, and then I took my pencil and I tried to erase that mistake, but it only made matters worse. I erased it one more time, and then now I've torn a hole in the page. And I really wanted to get it right, but all I did was make things worse and just mess them up further. But when I came up out of that water, it was as if the teacher said, everything's going to be okay, and handed me a new piece of paper and said, try again. But then he said he wasn't the teacher, he was the teacher's assistant, and he said the teacher would be coming soon. And if I'm being completely honest, I don't know when or how or where God will show up in your life or my life, but I'm convinced that it has something to do with dreaming dreams that we would never dream on our own, and singing songs made from notes that we can't even hear, and receiving new storylines that we could not ever have dreamed of writing for ourselves, even if we tried. So I invite you, children of God, to go down to the River Jordan, not as people who are perfectly put together, but to go in solidarity with our siblings in Christ, people that you know in your life, people that you've never met before, to step into the river with them, because our transformation as a community is inextricably bound up with one another. None of us are better or worse than each other. We've all made poor decisions and bad mistakes in our lives, but we should not be confined to a life of misery because we've done that. We can find our way forward together without passing judgment, realizing that we each have fallen short, and yet God continues to pick us up, to sing a new song, to write a new story, to be the authors of our life as we build this Tri-Valley community and we help people step into those better futures that are healthier, safer, and more whole for the families that we serve. Thank you, Linwood, for being part of this incredible journey here in the Tri-Valley. I can't wait to see what the next 30 years holds in store for Open Heart Kitchen and Linwood and this amazing partnership. Thank you. Amen.